my screen now. Right. So yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for this, all the speakers. It's wonderful talk. Also, all the participants who bear with us during this difficult time. So, as one of organizer, right now I'd like to summarize what we have heard from this morning section, also the talks. But pardon me, I'm mostly metallurgist. I'm very focused on technical aspect of the metal work. So I will try my best to give a recap all the points we heard today, and maybe some mistake I will make, but just bear with me. So first of all, we have Timothy Le Pen, and I think it's a wonderful example to set up the theoretical background of a section about life worlds and also resources. So he thinks like material resources transform humans' life and minds. So regardless whether in the present time or in the past. And he also see that rather than the cause for major social historical change, adopting resources sparkles new ways of thinking, which is embedded in our society, also the environment where resources are exploited. So the culture we see today is actually, or in the past, it actually emerged from the way humans interact with non-human things. And his idea about is extending mind and so human niches is very refreshing ideas to tell us about how important the environment to us is. Not the humans is not above environment. We actually coexisting and we shape by our environment surround us. And next speaker is Mark, and I think is as usual is very inspiring talk and is very give you an example in the rock smelting, copper smelting rock shelter in northwest Italy. During the Copper Age, late Copper Age and early Bronze Age, and he showed like this very copper smelting in this area have strong association with ritual or perhaps magical meaning to carry out these practice in a rock shelting. So this is very refreshing approach, opposed to mostly we only concentrate on technical aspect of copper smelting in Bronze Age Europe. Next speaker, Raphael, and he moved our focus to more some kind modern perspective, modernization of the European civilization, which is late Iron Age, Roman Age. We're starting to see the turn of economics show up. So we're seeing this mining, iron mining is more or less related to this industry and related to people purposely mine this iron to profit our life. So it's very dramatically different from the Bronze Age Europe. And he saw that there's a combination of both ritual economic aspect of iron production in this area. And the ritual part is manifested by the wine drinking, and economic one is by the use of bronze coins, which used as a labor payment. And next, we shift to our archaeological focus to more historical study about the European mining industry. And first of all, Tina, and give a wonderful talk about this life war of miners during the 16th and 17th century Europe, and she used this history from Agricola, and his kind of very idea, not just for technological aspect, is the idea how the miners' daily routine and the belief also are very important to understand the life war, which dominated always by the economic and also dominated by technological aspect of the mining industry in the medieval or early modern time Europe. And finally, with Lena, and she's also focusing on Europe. Europe is more like a Middle Age time, and she have a very interesting in knowledge to know how they get the knowledge from locating the deposit, and how do they know how to assess how they going to open the mine. And she gave a very nice example as well. We don't need to focus too much on, of course, it's also important economic or technical reason for opening mine. It's also important to look at the mental and emotional appropriation of resources, which is usually hidden behind the text. And so we should have more like interdisciplinary research approaches to uncover these kind of hidden secret, or not hidden more like a hidden evidence behind the life of miners. So that's basically my summary for all the talks. And I would like to very much start off very fundamental question, which is also Thomas giving this in the introduction to set up our discussion. Is like Thomas have one idea of routine and the technoscapes. So why archaeology can tell about daily routines. And one sentence particularly, I quote here, daily practice in work processes and all the social interaction that are combined with it are essential to reconstruct life worlds. So since about we have people from different disciplines, people start different periods. The first question I would like to throw to everybody is to start off our roundtable is, what is the definition of life world? Is the term is more like material or spiritual one, or both? Or is it more like individual world, or is it collective one? So that's the first question we'd like to, maybe we can have some opinion about it. Yep. Can anyone be? Yes, I think everyone's silent. Thank you.
I'm thinking all the time, if I may show you something that is just around me, because I would give an example. I was very, I like the talks very much, and what I would like to show you, because I have some mining lamps around me, and I would like to show you something. If we look on some types of lamps, this, for example, is one from Germany. You see, it's from around 1900, late 19th century. It's very small. You see a very small or short hook. If we look on another example from Romania, approximately the same time, you see the lamp is much bigger and it has this chain. A lot of lamps from Romania have these chains. So we might think it might be a local adoption to circumstances in the mine and so on. And now to come to the question, what is the definition of a life world, and is it an individual or a collective choice to change things? I would like to show you this example, what is in fact a German lamp. It comes from Westphalia, so produced around here in the Ruhr area somewhere. But you see it has a chain. So in fact, what can be assumed, I do not really know where it comes from, but we see that probably a miner from German Ruhr area moved probably to Transylvania, and he is using his own lamp, and he is not taking a lamp so working probably in Transylvania, Romania, he's not taking a local lamp, he's using his lamp. But obviously the circumstances in the mine forced him to change the hook and the whole way of handling the lamp. So this, if this is true, this thought, as I told you, I don't know where it comes from. It shows an adoption within a certain frame. So he's not taking a lamp from there, but he's changing his own way of lighting as one of the most important tools working underground to the local circumstances.
Thank you. I think I have questions pop up. Thank you. I think they have to switch to the checkbox. I don't know where it is. Okay. With sorry, I have a problem with this checkbox. It's gone. There's a checked auto edge. Yes. Right. Sorry. Okay. Question statement. Okay, Tina, please speak up.
Yes, with regards to your question to live worlds, they're totally intertwined with world views. And especially in my case, it's really impressive how contemporaries made sense of the underground with regards to the world above ground. So they are connected in a whole system of micro-macrocosmic relationship. And that goes to the human body, the perception of human bodies, and the planetary connections. So we can also see in the period where I was talking to, but also in the medieval time, much more of a resource cosmologies that encompass on a vertical level the underground, the below ground, and the planetary sphere. And that's really impressive. And this, then the definition of life worlds is not just restricted to individuals. Of course, it's a collective, intersubjective thing, and we also see that like astronomy is closely linked to the underground when we see with the metallogenesis, etc., and the astronomical prognostications, where one finds something, and which metal is good for which body part. And so these is also an entirely connected universe, and we cannot pick like a really utilitarian understanding of resources. This is a common sense here. Out of this, we have to see it in this entire connection.
All right. Thank you. And Thomas, you have statement or?
Yes, I want to.
Yes.
So the question, of course, starts again to make a dichotomy between these things. And I'm with Tina, of course, what she said. But, you know, if you come from an archaeological perspective, so from a perspective where we don't have written sources, and even they are treacherous, aren't they? So it's just, these are just representations, either in a material sense or in a written sense. So in this way, I would say you need to have, and this is what I meant, and you need to have these aspects of the embodiment as well as the aspect of the cognition. And the question for archaeology and even for the material culture studies, and we have heard examples from Tim Lecointe this morning, is to bridge these and now to figure out exactly what we can tell about our sources, and but also ashamed not to interpret to aspects that we cannot answer. And archaeologists often tend to try to answer too many things at once. This is a little bit self-critical to our field, but possibly this is also true for historians and others. So it's really what I vote for is, first of all, a holistic view we need, and an interdisciplinary debate about to understand both collective, individual notions, things of embodiment that constructs, but also are interwoven, entangled, and meshed to these spheres we're talking about. Okay. But this is very general, of course. We have to bring it down to the examples to be more clear what we mean in separate cases. Yeah.
Thank you. And myself also, I like to answer this question as well. I have some thought about it because I'm coming from the background, as you know, from more archaeopatology, technological part, and also in our discipline, we also, of course, we don't use life world per se, but we use other words more like a networking or like a interaction. We use that a lot, and it strikes me like most of the time we use it because we can define it, we can determine. For example, provenance studies very standardized now in our research, but because that's why sometimes we can determine, we can find a connection. So we think that's important to ask. But is that really important to actually represent the life world of the past people? I don't think that's the case. But sometimes we have as archaeometallurgy, we can only determine something. So we kind of project our perspective of life world to the life world, which probably different from the actual miners or actual metal workers. So that's the perspective I got from this idea of life world, which was quite different as in our discipline. Okay, so anyone can I comment? Okay, Mark, please speak up. Mark Pierce, thank you.
Thank you. I think this question about individual or collective goes to the very heart of what archaeology, or particularly prehistoric and protohistoric archaeology, is all about. What we do when we do archaeological research is to look for patterns, and anomalies sometimes can tell us a lot, but they tend to be less significant in terms of a general population. So one of the big discussions of the last 30 years, of course, has been between the modernists and the postmodernists, the post-processualists. And a lot of that discussion is whether we can actually know what the individual is thinking, what is the individual's life world. Because, I mean, if you look at what I did this morning, I tried to look at a whole population. I tried to look at every example in my study area and to look for a pattern. Now, looking for a pattern is not looking for an individual. Looking for a pattern is looking for a collective viewpoint. So I think this question really does go to the heart of what archaeology is all about. Thank you.
Constance, you can speak up now.
It's maybe directly referring also to Mark, even though I didn't know what you said as before. I didn't know what you will say. If we take the idea of a life world seriously, going back to Husserl and maybe not Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, in its idea of body perception, any kind of sensual perception, it is, of course, first of all, an individual level. That's the reason I wanted to ask you for your presentation. What's about the cave? What's about the circumstances? What's about a description, a sensual description of the environment of your site? Of course, I do know that it will never fit the prehistoric miner, but it gives us an idea what might be of importance. But the interesting part, if we work together, history, any kind of social science, metallurgy, would be to use the thread Husserl has already given us to say, on one hand, these experiences are very individual, but due to narrations, due to written sources, songs, and whatever, it becomes part of a larger community. So taking that as a narrative, or taking that as a red line to follow up, to understand where it emerges, individual experiences by tasks of certain groups. They have similar experiences, they share it through narrations, through songs and myth, to really combine all the different approaches on sources, so on resources. That might be helpful. I don't know, it's just an idea. Sorry.
Could I respond to that? Sorry.
Yeah.
I really don't want to suggest that as archaeologists we can't reconstruct the individual's life world. That's not what I'm trying to say. I mean, absolutely we can.
I didn't think so.
A good example of that is, you know, looking at Ötzi, where what we have is quite an incredible view of one particular person and their world. I suppose what I was trying to say, and I'm often not very good at expressing what I'm trying to say, and I apologize. What I was trying to say is we actually have to ask ourselves whether that life world that we see with the individual case study is a good representation of that of the community, or whether it just refers to that individual. And I think that's an essential problem of statistical significance of the data that we're looking at. You know, how important is that individual case to understand what the majority of people were doing or thinking or practicing? Thanks.
Thank you. So then we can take a pause. We go with this open question to ask individual speaker. And Matteo, I think you have a question to ask Mark, right? And you can speak up.
Yes. Well, my question was more about related to the case studies, which was about the possible influence of the environmental and geological settings of Trentino that impact upon the emergence of these not metalworking activities, but le attività di fusione, the smelting activities. So my question is if this secret character of the smelting activities can be related to an extent to the resource availability, and in this sense, if also the ritual aspect of smelting can be considered as a kind of can be considered in a symbiotic dimension with the environment, which bring me to the statement, to the original question, which Thomas brought about. So how we can define life force, you know? So in terms of just in material terms, or in spiritual terms, or in both terms. I think that we can define in both terms actually, and that this definition can offer broad scope to explore the significance of the resources in this approach.
If I can try to answer that question, perhaps I'd like to make reference to the RESOC forum that was held last summer, when there was some very, very interesting and for me very illuminating discussion about the nature of apprenticeship and the learning of craft. Now, I do understand that not everybody who's here today was able to hear that discussion. But what strikes me about the learning of craft, and you see this very much in the medieval crafts, you know, the guilds in London, the medieval guilds in London talked about their mysteries. So all the guilds had the mysteries, and these mysteries you learnt through apprenticeship. So I'm not sure that the need for secrecy and the mystery of metallurgy, to coin a phrase, is just about the magical nature of the transformation of ore into metal. I think that there's a very fundamental aspect of learning craft that has to do with secrecy, trade secrets, keeping knowledge private. Of course, magic seems to be very closely intertwined with metallurgy. Metallurgy is very special. Just going to your other question, which is about environment, I think it's true to say that there are many aspects of our culture in which the mountain is seen as a mystic and very special place. And it may be worth reflecting on whether that plays a role in the mysteries that I've been talking about. I'm not convinced, however, that the image of the mountains that's projected by some of the classical sources as orridi, as dangerous, as very, very, a very aggressive nature, is the reality of the lived experience of people in antiquity. For example, there's a very interesting passage by Polybius, who is commenting on Hannibal crossing the Alps, where Polybius says, oh, all these other historians talk about the Alps as being a difficult and dangerous and risky place, but I've been there and it's not really like that. So I think we need to be wary that there are lots of topoi, lots of literary toposes in the out there, and they may not have reflected the reality of the effects of the environment on people in the past. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, I think Matteo would like to continue.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, So I missed Tina's one follow-up question. Tina, you can speak out now. Sorry.
I think it already, it already is past, because I was irritated, but I think it's a disciplinary irritation that we speak of different concepts of an individual. When I hear an individual, I always like, oh, and I think of Burckhardt, the race with the Renaissance and the individual, and that, yeah, an autonomous thinking and acting subject. But I think your perception of the individual is a completely different one. So it's a more a subject, a unique piece of something, or it's not like a culturally. So then it's, I see head, because when I hear individual, I'm always like my alarms are clocks.
Thank you. And Thomas, you have a comment to make. You can now speak.
Yes, I want to not to stress now the arguments uttered forward here, but I wanted to stress one point that also Tim Lecoeur made, is that, for instance, to focus also in this question of life worlds, and whether it's individual or more collective life worlds, is the way how people are learning and appropriating material. And thinking about the point that Tim made is about how to see what is sharpness, for instance, with flint. Yeah, how you would know about sharpness if you have not, for instance, enjoyed yourself cutting your finger and bleeding and seeing, okay, this is something that can be used for. And this is the same with material properties in general. So I would say, and this is constantly renewed in these embodied worlds, isn't it? So this is one kind of difficulty we do have when we talk about as archaeologists, especially, but I guess also as historians and ethnographers and so on. So this constant reformulation of experiences coming into the narratives, which are shared then. And I think the same is what I said yesterday for the forgetting. It's also, how do you forget these things by not using it any longer because it doesn't make sense to do so. And I think to stress more these processes of changing and concepts of life worlds will help us to understand also of our archaeological realities, which are so treacherous, which are so difficult us to understand. It's just a comment on that. We have to rethink much more our evidences, I would say.
Okay, thank you. And then we move on to our next aspect of appropriation of resource, because I also found it's very interesting where our topic actually divided into more or less two disciplines and also two periods. One is more like a prehistorical, more like archaeological research. The other one is more historical, more like a more medieval, modern, early modern Europe. And also we have Raphael, which in between the middle, I would call it more transitional. We have seen both influence. And that's my idea is they strike me because yesterday we heard a talk from the Roland Hatterberg, and he emphasized how his project is going to study resource not from the economic point of view, try to overcome the dominated economical views of resource usage. So to him, the resource is something very cultural, determined, but today we know that because from archaeology, I think I can relate it because we know nothing about the economic system in the past, and we know little bit very about it. So we will attribute all those resources more like cultural determined. But for the talk from today, from historical period, we find out more like they are decided to use the mineral, use the resource out of a profit, out of the actual property of can make money. So I just wondering how the perception of the appropriation of resources, how can they change from more like cultural to economical determinants with progression of time, or there's a false comment, or maybe it's not a right statement, but it's just like a statement why we see this change over time. Yep.
May I just say one word?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I think I didn't use the word determinism yesterday.
No. That's my question.
Against what I think, determinism would be cause and effect, something that really has no other perspective or result than achieving this particular thing. So I always see culture as an option and as contested and as having variations and so on. So I wouldn't use this word determinism in my case. Yeah.
Oh yes, sorry, I just
no.
Yeah,
okay.
that's that. And my more like a technological aspect was determine. I'm a determining person. So then we have the Nicole, right? You can speak up.
I think we have heard a lot of this embeddedness of mining, but I think that the economical aspects for us as archaeologists are still quite important, because sure, we don't know so many about the ancient economy, but this is something we can try to calculate with the material we really examine. And perhaps from this point, we can do the second step. Everything what is not fitting in our calculations, to think about how we can embed this into culture, or how to embed what we maybe can explain if there is another explanation. But I guess as archaeologists, we don't have anything than these material or economic factors to start our research on. No.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, and also I have feeling, because unfortunately today our topic more like a Western, more like probably case study from the Europe. So I would imagine in other part of the world we probably won't see this kind of change through progression of time. Maybe it's just this linear change, which is not true at all in actual human life. So any further comments? If not, I will move to the next one. All right. So next one is also is idea draw from the Thomas introduction talk about sphere of actions. So I quote here, he said, techniques and practices can only be successful adopted if the counterparting people already are acquainted to similar practice and the mental construct. So I show this figure. I read this book, and also Mark quoted already from the red gold from Africa by the Albert. And I think he one of his conclusion, he mentioned that the gold, the metal, like the gold most active in drawing the attention of Arab and the European, European world, was one of which the African themselves generally value the least. So that strike me this sentence, because also in I come from China. China, not until the Tang Dynasty, which is 800 AD, the gold started to appear in the burial, in the settlement. But before that, gold is just not valued as important as in the Western Islamic world. So my question here for this roundtable is, why determine different value system in the society? How do we have such diversity in the world? I have to open out the chat. Sorry again. Question. No. Where is it? Okay, Matthias, please.
Yes, I mean, starting from this, I would answer also connecting to what Professor Hardenberg said yesterday, that basically value systems are still part of cultural systems, no? So we grant value to things, whatever kind of value, according to, this is my thinking actually, according to what we perceive can be a valuable object. And this brings me also to the previous comments of Nicole about the economy, the important aspect of the economy in our discourse. Even though economics are economy is a kind of a very material dimension, which can be perceived effectively and determines our lives. Still, I don't think it's the most important aspect in this process of emerging life worlds and how we can define resources. I think that this is part again of our mental template, of how we think and processes what we think is relevant, which is indeed typical of Western societies. Again, I want to link to the inaugural lectures of Professor Hardenberg, which brought about other examples. For instance, if I remember well, about the cultivation of millet, which even though it has a very material significance, material importance in order to sustain the life, there was something also to be connected, if I remember well, with the kind of the ritual sphere. And so again, it's a matter of how I think how our philosophical background, mostly Western philosophical backgrounds, Cartesian thinking, impacted upon the development history of how we perceive resources. So I wanted just to make this kind of observation.
Thank you. And Thomas, you make your comment.
Sorry, yeah, it's just a comment. What I meant is basically that it has to do with some sort of connectivity of experiences and expectations. And I think this is not necessary. There is not necessarily a need of having a cultural construct always in behind. And what I mean is that if you share expectations, experiences, of course you could start, okay, of course you could say, okay, this is a cultural level. But anyway, what I meant is really having a connectivity and looking for these connectivities of expectations, experiences, learned things, etc. Yeah, and I think this will help us to understand how practices, habitualized doings can be adopted. And this is, I guess, in Kraft's theory, and Constance and her team can say a lot about it, is certainly an important point, how you can talk about techniques and transfer of techniques. And of course, if you bring it to a general level, you would say it's not only techniques, it's everything that we transfer from the one to the other. And not only from the humans to the humans, possibly also from other living beings, as we learn, of course, also from animals. Yeah.
Thank you. So, and I think that's my screen froze. What? Sorry, my screen here. Okay, good. And I will, just because time, I will jump to this question, which I found also how the observation I heard from the talk about interesting aspect to ask. Because recently I read a book written by the Chris Gosden from the University Oxford Archaeology Department, a book named Magic of the World. So basically our talk is basically, I think, pretty fitting into the is kind of different cultural background, the appropriation resource, because from different background. So first of all, we have this kind of magical ritual use of the resource of the copper. And later, in the Iron Age Roman period, perhaps we're into the maybe we have more religious, like the Christianity or Catholic influence on the mining landscape. Then maybe we have science, maybe evolution, and we start the emergence of science. So we become like the human can become above the environment, so we cannot see the nature differently before. So I just wondering, how do you think this evolution, evolution from this people perspective of environment or landscape, how do we see this kind of trend, or how do we interpret it in this way to see? Yes. Where is it? Tina, please.
Do you see this as a sequence, as you now written down, so from magical to religion to science? Then I would harshly disagree, because it's all on the same time. And even in later periods, like to come again with the 16th, 17th, but also 18th centuries, there is religion, there is science, and there is magic. And what is magic? This is there is there are, especially with practices of geomantics, and also Foucault had a crystal lamp for. So it's I wouldn't say that this is I wouldn't defer these into a line of development.
Okay. Yeah, I'm making it wrong. So I didn't mean the development, more like there's a certain characteristic of this period. There's certain characteristics show up in the to define the resource. So from the magic to science is something I observe in a way, like in a way like people starting to change. But of course, there's a mixing value or mixing system about this. Thank you.
Oh, okay, then
yes. So yes, but I just to be provoking. I mean, that's a question. Okay, then Aidin Abba, please make your comment.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. With your clarification, you took away basically the basis, because I was going into the same direction. I mean, even today, I guess you will find what some would call superstition in between miners, and like the Heilige Barbara as something you have to venerate and to celebrate and so on. So, but yeah, the clarification pulled away my thanks. Thanks.
Yeah. So, and Constant, please.
Well, I do agree with Tina and Aidin and so on. It's just a relic out of evolutionary thoughts. It might be interesting to consider it as a kind of hegemonic knowledge, in the sense of Gramsci, that we have certain periods to tries to promote, or people afterwards try to promote a certain perspective on it, and might be another view on that topic. Just an idea.
Okay. So you mean like more like the modern construction of idea, or
not only the modern, but also the self-construction. If you have written sources, if you want to be like in industrialization, you want to be modern, that's a very simplified idea. If this is the hegemonic knowledge of that time, if you consider, for example, in Essen, the Zeche Zollverein, which is built in this modern idea of the time of the machines and all these ideology behind that. So this wants to construct a certain hegemonic knowledge about your own zeitgeist or whatever. So maybe we can consider it with Gramsci and something like that.
Okay, thank you. And so, and then what's enough time? Hopefully, we go by this more like a methodology question I observed from the talk. So basically, from the archaeological part, I want to ask a question about the problem of the presentism. So we tend to project our own idea to the past. So how do we not to do that? Oh, it's okay, we can still do that, because the life work of ours also shape the understanding of in the past. And the second one is more not for sorry, the title is wrong, for historical period. So how do we reconstruct life work of lower class people who was not the one produced written records? So how do we choose, how can we generally reflect their life work? So Mark, please. I like to actually. I like to ask you. Maybe you can make comment. Please go ahead.
I don't think that we can avoid projecting ourselves onto the past. In a sense, every generation makes its own past. We have different questions. We ask the questions that interest us of the past. And in a certain extent, we find the answers that we're looking for. So I don't think we can avoid doing this. I'm not sure that it matters terribly much either, because one of the joys of doing prehistory is that you can never know if your reconstruction is correct. And you have to have the humility to say, the reconstruction that I'm offering is partial and it may be wrong, but it's the best that I can do until there is more information. And then as we get more information, we can change our views and we can modify them. So I don't think it matters. I think they are inevitably what you call presentism.
Yes.
That's my answer.
Thank you. And I think also I would like to Tina and also Lena to answer this question, how, because I'm not historian, but very much interested to listen to opinion. How do you approach this life war of these miners if the written record is not actually representable? I mean, yeah, Lena, please.
Yeah, that's what I tried to explain with my talk, because if we don't have the written record, then we have to look at different sources, at other sources, and work with other disciplines together. If there are no written sources, then we can't read them. It's normal. So yeah, perhaps there is a gap in the tradition, and then we have to deal with it. And I think it's not the thing of reconstructing what really happened. It's everything what we do is an interpretation. So it's our interpretation of the past, and we have to deal with the source we have. And if there are no sources, then we can't read them. That was.
Yes, and if I could add on this, it's also we stressed even before, and that did Elena in her answer before, this interdisciplinary collaboration, and especially when I think life words of low-class people, when we especially think on the medical culture and the legacy of and the influence, the high influence of Paracelsus in also rural areas and also in mining areas, we really see that he has this understanding, and not him, it's also like this entire Renaissance culture of like from Ficino and everybody with this macrocosmic relationship, and also to see everything's connected, and also the minerals to the plants, etc. And then I really think that when we see like this everyday medical culture, and also sometimes we have written or treatises on recipe books, there we also have findings, and also archaeological excavation of early modern like laboratories, or we can clearly see, like in this case with Paracelsus, that he had an influence, and that his interpretation of this relationship between the planets and the minerals, etc., and their effects. He always also interpreted them like in a Christian in a way, and made relation to the lives of Christ, etc. And there also we can do not know for sure, but we can come quite close of what people in early modern, like these mining areas thought, and yeah, and also how they acted and interpreted their world with their signatures, etc.
Thank you for your comment. And I'm sorry, I think I should wrap it up because it's almost 12:30 in this time, and then probably it's lunchtime, and people are very exhausted. I'm sorry I couldn't let everyone to make a comments. So I think I will wrap it up here, and that's the end of our section. I'm sorry. So then we see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock for our section, the other section hosted by the Konstantin and Maya. Okay, thank you for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.